Just begin this connecting. Good to go. Okay, I think we are live with 24 people. Guys, can you hear me? If you can, give me a thumbs up or anything on the chat. Okay. Yeah, nice. Great. Awesome. All good. Okay, first of all, thank you folks for joining us on a Wednesday evening at 9 p.m. With the liquor bans off. It's kind of difficult for us to come up at 9 to show up around, and thanks for this. So, just to start this event, I would like to first talk a bit about the unconventional geeks. Uh, See, I've been doing product events for the past 1 year, but this is something that has been in my mind for a while. That how can we build a collaborative platform wherein we can bring in product managers or leaders who have walked the path less taken, someone whose career background has been, say, from economics or psychology, or say someone like Yogesh who's from design. So how can we leverage their learnings and learn and kind of implement that in our day-to-day work of PMing, right? So this is the first in the series of all these unconventional events. We'll not only focus on events, but definitely more things like blogs, masterclasses, books, and a lot more. So, cutting this short, I would like to introduce Yogesh to you all. Yogesh currently is a senior program manager at Microsoft and is handling a super popular product, which is Microsoft Teams. I'm pretty sure that many of you would be the users. If not, definitely would have heard a lot about the buzz around, right? So today Yogesh would be talking about his learning from his design background, because in the past he has been working on user experience for companies like Flipkart, Common Floor, and other consumer products, and then he kind of moved on to build platform products at Microsoft, and he's currently PMing, as in building products as a product manager, right? So handing over the mic to Yogesh. And yeah, just a small disclaimer: Yogesh is currently in Jaipur, so unfortunately, the internet connectivity might just be a problem. But yeah, we've kind of tested this, and this should be all in. Second, just a small thing. I'm not alone in this. I have a partner in crime, which the person is called Siddharth Sharma. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hey guys, nice
Siddharth.
to meet you. Thanks for having me here, Karsh. Really nice to have everyone here with us. I actually met with Karsh about 6 months ago, and we've been doing a few events together. And I think over time we realized we share a lot of similar ideas and sort of approach towards a lot of different problems. And wanted to do something together. And a big thank you to him for bringing me in this. Something that I definitely feel quite passionately for, and looking forward to bringing a lot of good events for everyone here and trying to grow this community.
Awesome. So let's not take more time, Siddharth. Let's go back to starting this great session with Yogesh. Yogesh, over to you. The crowd is entirely yours. Let's begin.
Thanks, Utkarsh. So I'll turn off my video because of connectivity, which just Utkarsh said. And I'll start sharing my screen. Just confirm once if you guys are able to see it. And we'll get started soon. Mm. Utkarsh, if you can see, or anyone, like, can once confirm? Okay, great. Yeah, awesome. So, guys, what I'm going to talk about today is PM versus platform PM, and how design helped me in actually adapting to being a platform product manager. But before that, let me get started with something which we need to talk, which is these are very uncertain times, and this is a crisis which we have not seen. But despite of that, you guys are here, and which is really great. It definitely provides a sense of normalcy to us, although like things are not normal. And I'll just start off saying that please stay safe, please stay healthy. This is a time where you really need to take care of your family and people around you. So let's get started. Like with that, let's get started. So I am Yogesh. I love building impactful products. I have been a PM in Microsoft for around 2.5 years now, and I think it's around 8 years of my 8 years of my career, and out of which more than 5 years I have been working as UX designer. And I started my platform PM journey into Microsoft Power Apps. Microsoft acquired a company way back in 2016, and by 2018, like a small team in India was given the responsibility to run it, the complete business, which is Power Apps, which is now branded as Power Apps Portals. And so that was the opportunity when I became a PM, and it was really hard at first, but like within 2 years we scaled that product from 1 million end user MAU to 16 million end user MAU. And very recently, like around just 2 months back, I moved to Microsoft Teams as a platform PM for mobile applications. So I'm helping teams build the new app or maybe capabilities for mobile apps around their application ecosystem. So with that, like I'll set the context again. I struggled with first 4 months, like of course moving from a UX designer to a platform PM, but I was finally able to come out successful. And a lot of this, like the sense of doing right, came from my roots, which was I again be considered. Of course, like when I moved from UX to PM, I thought things are going to be different. Things are like you will have something new to work on. But what I realized more, that the way to build products is of course similar whether you are a UX or a PM. And design is not just limited, or not just an IP of designers. Design is something which is used across multiple roles. And I of course took the same design framework and adapted it for my job, for my role, which helped me in becoming a better PM. And what I'm and for a session with a session like this, my aim of doing this is always so that the audience can take something practical, useful from here and apply in their job. And that's the reason when I talk about these things, I always talk it about in terms of tips. So even though we are going to go in a bit of theory, but at the end of the day, I'll make it very simple, which will be like, see, this is the tip here. Go ahead, and if you think this is right, go ahead and use it. So I hope this will help you guys. Uh, Moving on. So I think the very basic question is, what is the difference between like platform product management and the consumer product management? And a full disclaimer that I've never been a consumer PM, but I've worked very closely with a lot of consumer PMs while I was designer. So I think this is the kind of analogy which I give to general people, which is if you're building a house, you are building of people who are going to design in this, and you have a consumer whom you have selected. But the platform you build is for people who are going to build the house, which is again going to be selling to the consumer. So now the stakeholders are very different. Like there are more stakeholders involved into a platform than just consumer product management. And I think the image of a single brick do not really do justice. Think of it like image of 10,000 bricks or 100,000 bricks, which can build a house. That's what a platform is. So, and like now saying that, like I'll probably like this is the bare bones model of a platform. Like if we talk about model, if platforms are very different, like across different industries, across different sectors. So I'm not going to go into any of the technical details for this session. I will talk about the pure bare bones model of what platform is. When you have a platform, you have a stakeholder called makers, or developers, or builders. You can call them anyone. They actually go ahead and build on your platform, which leads to product, which can be a same product, or it can be a variation of product. It can be completely different product, which is like product A, product B, product C, which is again used by consumers. So when you are here, while consumer PMs are actually in product A, product B, product C role, you platform PM's job responsibility is at this stage. And therefore your stakeholders are not just consumers, your stakeholders are also going to be makers. And believe me, like for the next 30 minutes, this is what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about makers and consumers again and again and again till the time you'll have a better clarity on how important makers and consumers and like how design actually plays a role in making their life easier. So next step, just to give you an example of a platform, if someone is not able to relate, like you can take example of Android app development, you can take example of iOS app development, which are app development tools for pro code users, where you can actually go ahead and build an app which can be used by consumers. So Android app development platform is a platform which is, and you, if you are a developer on Android, you are a maker, and if you build an app which will be used by consumer. So that's the exact same process which I just talked about in the last slide. Similarly, like there are different flavors to it. Like for example, while Procode users are being, you can say, like serviced by Android and iOS app development tools, like Power Apps, like tools like Power Apps, it's a low code, no code app development tool where you can drag and drop things, relate with simple logic, and actually publish the app. Similarly, Salesforce, in fact, not only Salesforce, you have Dynamics 365, you have Zoho, most of the CRM tools as well are mostly platform as a product or platform as a service. That is, nobody is going to use your sales app directly out of box. People will need makers or customizers who can customize their platform to suit a business need or suit an industry need. And that's how the product gets used. And this is all about like more of a platform as a service. But if you talk about platform teams which are internal to a company, that's, I think this is a more prevalent audience, or you can say use cases, which I think this talk will also serve to, where you can be a part of an internal platform team which is serving to different business groups, because business groups are building maybe a portal or website onto your service, or onto the service, backend service provided by you. And by the way, just a FYI, that even AWS started as a platform to serve Amazon. GCP started as a platform to serve Google search. And today they are not only, they in fact surpass the platform as a service construct. They are an infrastructure as a service. So now I think although I want to take questions now, but I think it will be better if you can take the questions later. But I'll just confirm if you guys can give a thumbs up to say that we were good till here. Perfect. Okay. All right. So the first thing and the only most important rule on platform, and I think if people understand this and if people actually learn this, I think more than 50% of my job is done. And I know that this is a very common sense thing. Like a lot of people think of it as a very trivial thing, but when it comes to practice, people tend to forget it a lot. And the rule is, for a platform, maker brings more consumers and consumers bring more makers. Take a simple example of, and it's in no particular order, that you cannot go ahead and say, it's like, which one is important, maker or consumer? It's very business contextual. There's no particular order. There's no general rule of which people who are more important. We can take an example of an Android. When Android started, like you had like initial consumers who were using it for basic features, but then you had an app development platform where people started building apps. Because of that, the Android usage went high. Because there were more people using Android, there were more makers who got shifted onto Android. So it's kind of a cycle which brings each other. I think one of the gap which even Windows had, like they were not able to attract that many developers during that time, and therefore the consumers as well. And I think that's one of the reasons, although it had a lot many reasons, that was one of the reasons where Windows was not able to catch up with Android and iOS. So moving on. Now let's talk about usual design process. Let's talk about usual design process. And this is something which I have been using for the last 8 years. It's not a rocket science. Believe me, I'm a very firm believer of the design process needs to be part of high school curriculum. And it is as simple as that. Even today, I'm using the same framework which I have used at the start of my career. And this simplifies a lot. What I'll do is I'll probably spend next 5 minutes explaining this design process. And at each stage, what changes for platform, that's what I'm going to talk about. And what can you do about it? So let's start with this. Let's start with the first stage of a design process, which is empathize. In the empathy stage, you just need to figure out your personas. You need to figure out your customers. Not only customers, in fact, consumers. Because customers and consumers can be different. You need to go you need to step into their shoes. Like there are so many things which you can talk about. Like you can step into their shoes. You can live with. You can mock. You should mock their life. Like mock as in like you should try to live their life. You should be able to understand how they think, how they do things. And once you have the empathy built for your customers, you can start identifying the right problems and right pain points. And this is something where over the course of my career, I've seen a lot of people doing it wrong, because they generally the problem either has been given by leadership, or the problem has been something which has come by intuition. They don't spend a lot of time actually identifying the right problem, or in fact, even if they have identified the right problem, they are not able to phrase the problem rightly, which makes a ton of difference. And so that is the second stage, that you need to precisely, accurately define the right problems and pain points. The next one is, once you have the good problem definition, you need to start ideating on what can we do about that problem, or what can we do about those pain points. And you should brainstorm as many possible solutions as you can. And the solution does not limit it to, for example, even if you are working on a digital media, or you are working on software as a product, but your ideas should not be limited to just those constructs. You can have totally radical solution to a problem, because at the end of the day, you are still a business, and your business still needs to be served. Your customer still needs to be served by your business. The next stage, once you have good idea, then you start prototyping different ideas, and you kind of build a representation of your solution. Now, people here can choose to either create a mock prototype, or can actually involve developers and create a working solution as well. So prototypes is a deep science in itself. There are so many, like there are at least 40 ways of building prototypes. And of course, I'll not go into that, but you can think about it for, especially for a platform. There's nothing called platform prototyping without actually coding it. So that's a disclaimer. And so you build a representation of your solution, and then you take that prototype and test it with actual users. In our case, we actually need to test it with our actual makers as well as actual consumers. So this is very high level stages of what design, what design process is. And what I'm going to talk about in next steps are going to be few additional key points which help me. So when I failed, or when I started to struggle, I actually forgot these things, because a lot of stakeholders approached me saying that, okay, we have this requirement, here is the deadline, here is what we need to do, here, this is the product which needs to go out. So why isn't your capability ready, and so on. And I literally had to consciously go back and figure out that this is not right. We need to go back to our roots and say that this is the process which we want to follow for every problem which other partners are going to come up with us, come up to us. So let's move on to the next stage. So this is where I'm going to start with tips. So we have already seen the stages. Now I'm going to start with tips, that in what stage, what a platform PM should do, or how a platform PM should think. So the first is empathize. Now in the empathy stage, the key stark difference, which I think you must have already guessed before, is both makers and consumers are your key customers. And now the world changes for you, because you just don't have end consumer to take care of. You have two personas at minimum to manage. And any decision, any idea you take for platform needs to be vetted thoroughly for both makers and consumers. So that's kind of an additional responsibility for platform. Moving next, even an internal partner who is dependent on you is same as external partner. And this is such a frequent scenario which I have seen across especially last 5 years across different companies, that in some teams, like if, for example, if your platform as a product is really taking off in external market, and there's an external customer who came to you saying that, can you build this capability, and I'll bring my customers onto it, on top of it. And then you have an internal partner who also comes to you saying that, I also have requirement, I'm also building something on this. I think we need to treat both of them as external customers. We need to treat them as your customers, and that's the secret of being a platform. You need to negotiate with both them on equal, you can say equal terms. You cannot have favoritism to either internal or external one. And I think mostly, like none of the companies actually follow this. We really took a very conscious call on doing this, that the process for internal as well as external customers are going to be same. And that's where we had standardized criteria to actually pick up our work. And that helped us a lot. And it goes back to the same rule, that any maker drive consumers and vice versa. So again, like while empathy, don't differentiate between your internal and external partners. Also, a quick tip, learn to say no to any customer. It is very important skill. You cannot have everything agreed to whatever customer says. So you as a PM, it's your job to actually evaluate and prioritize what is important, what is not. All right. So these are the two tips which I found very helpful in the empathy stage. Now let's talk about the definition stage, definition of the problem. And as I told, like not a lot of people actually spend a lot of time in defining the problems, right? Even if they define it, they actually don't write it down, because what writing it down means is it gets defined for your whole team, and it's not just in words, which you are communicating through maybe Teams or emails. And when you're writing it down, you need to make sure that you're writing it down in terms of a user story, both for a maker as well as a story for a consumer. And the same thing needs to be perceived by two different personas. And writing it down, because when your development team is going to, by the way, we don't follow stick document or PRD, we follow XR, which is a very different format. But the idea is whenever you're writing down the problem needs to be defined for both the personas, which your dev team can also perceive, can also understand, and they can understand why are we doing what we are doing. So moving on, tip number 4, and this is again very important, and it's not just your responsibility. I think it's a responsibility of your leadership of your organization, that in a given time frame, you cannot have both maker and consumer at the same priority. That means, like for example, if there are two competing, you can say two competing requirements, which is coming for a maker front versus which is coming from a consumer front, your organization needs to have a direction of what is more important for the next 3 months or next 6 months, and it depends a lot in the what kind of business stage you are in. For example, let's take an example. It's an hypothetical example. I don't know if Android went through that stage or not. But if Android had suddenly got a boom of customers, but they see their like app developers or like ratio of app developers to consumers going down, then for the next 3 months, they must have clearly declared that the priority for next 3 months is going to be makers. And that's where the investment is going to be. And that's where the things are going to, like that's the way we are going to take call on the priority of things. So like the whole point of this is, in the problem definition, you should have a clear direction at a given point of time, who is more important, maker or a consumer. And you should be defining your key KPI according to that. All right, checking in again because of my connection. Sorry, again a thumbs up, please, if you guys are able to see this. Okay, perfect. Okay, now let's talk about ideation stage. And I think this is a phrase which I recently read into Ken, like it's one of the blogs, but it's such a true phrase where it says that complexity that work actually evolved from simplicity which worked before. Like all the complex products which you take today and is working fine is because they were simple at some point of time and their usage really took it off. If you are building something complex from scratch, it is never going to work, and that's called Gall's law. And it's quite a famous law. You'll actually see it quoted at a lot more place. And the whole point of saying this is telling this is, when you are editing for a platform, there are two things you should take care about. One is your ideas needs to be very simple, or your idea needs to be extensible. By extensible, I means that whatever you decide for a platform, more things can be built or more platform capabilities can be built on top of it. So yeah, I think that's it for ideation. Next, tip number 6. Whenever you are ideating, and in fact, this is for execution as well. Whenever you are ideating or doing anything custom, whenever you're doing anything on a platform, never do anything custom for a customer, because it definitely sets an incorrect precedence. Today you have done for this customer A, and today you have done for, let's say, internal customer B. And next time people are going to come back and say that since you have given some custom capability to this partner, I think you need to give me custom capability for this partner, for me as well. And that sets a very incorrect precedence. And not only this, now imagine the ROI which you are getting on your work. If you would have built the custom capability as a generic platform capability, which is available to all, there was a lot more audience who can actually got benefited from this. If there is something which not anyone needs, or even only one person needs, depending on the ROI, you can easily take a call whether it's even worth doing that or not. So, of course, there are exceptions to this rule, but I would say avoid doing anything custom as much as possible on a platform. You have to look out for building overall extensibility. All right. Next phase, after ideation comes prototyping. And if you have been working in a platform team, I think you most of you would have find it by now. If you're not, if you are looking to work in a platform team, believe me, this is going to be very true for all of you. Where make quick POCs as your friend. By POC, I mean proof of concept, which is quick explorations using taking help of developers or engineers, or in fact, you also get involved into it, and have a process of doing rapid proof of concepts, because the most in fact, a lot of platforms face a challenge of backtracking any capability once getting released. So for example, if I'm an Android developer and if I release a certain capability to my makers, and if I backtrack it later, there will be a lot of apps which will get impacted, because people have already started building on top of it. So make POCs, make investigation as your friend. Don't shy away from these in the name of avoiding rework. Of course, there needs to be a certain balance, but make like again, be get comfortable with this. You will have to do into your development process. Now, tip number 8, and this is something which I learned the very hard way, that always work with pool of early adopters. It can be an internal team, it can be external partners whom you can share very different builds rather than a generic build, and they can help. They can try it out for you. They can give you feedback, and they are most importantly they are ready to take the brunt of revisions in terms of platform. So they'll not be on the production build, definitely. They are going to mostly they are going to be in a sandbox build or a build specifically made for them. But and it's hard for a lot of organization to do this. But as a generic rule, we should always work with early adopters, because building a capability in isolation without people using it is mostly going to fail. It's very easy to do in consumer world. Consumer world has a lot of different constructs. You have A/B testing. You have a lot of good consumer analytics on top of it, which you can actually analyze and adopt. You can be very agile in terms of consumer products, but that is a liberty which you don't have in a platform. And that's the reason whenever you're working on something, you need to have close relations with your early adopters or some customers with you who are ready to take bet on your new capabilities which you are building. All right, let's go to final stage, test. And this is where things become a lot different. Because when we talk about test stage for design, we generally talk about validating the UI, we generally talking about validating the scenarios, we talk about usability testing and so on. Platform brings a whole lot different meaning for testing. Because if I've done a POC and my customers have said that okay, the UI looks good, or maybe like if I'm just providing him a new API to consume in JS SDK, okay, the API looks good and everything is fine. But when we say that we have tested this feature from customer, it needs to be tested for scale. It needs to be tested for resiliency as well, and not just for user scenarios. This is one of the very stark difference. Of course, a lot of consumer products also do this, but this thing can still come into a late stage of the product definition, while platform team does not have always have liberty of doing it later. So this is something which platform product PMs should be wary about. All right. And like in terms of design process, this is the last one. I talked about extensibility before, and believe me, it's very important. And again, I'm reinforcing that you also need to test specifically for extensibility, which means that if you're building something, you should know what all possible scenarios can be built using this capability and where will be the blockers for makers. And you need to take a call whether are we fine where makers are getting blocked for these scenarios, and can we extend this capability to someday solve the blocked scenarios as well. So it has to be the accessibility has to be balanced, where we say that okay, things can be built in a myriad of ways, and as well as if we want people to build more capability on top of this capability, I don't even if people cannot do it today, they'll be able to do it tomorrow. So that's again something which we need to do in the testing stage for platform. Now, these this is probably the last slide for me. I think I went quite fast. Oh yeah, I actually finished this off in 20 minutes. Sorry for that. But few bonus tips, and these are very important, especially for people who are moving in platform PM, playing PM. And believe me, like when I moved as UX to PM, I thought like maybe platform is not something for me. But I really got really comfortable and I started enjoying doing that kind of work. And that's the reason I moved from being a platform PM to another platform PM, to a platform PM on another product. And I think the first tip is, in terms of bonus tips, is don't be afraid of technology. I know that sometimes it feels overwhelming, but if 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 you are truly passionate about building a product, you need to start embracing it. And after a while, take help of your engineering team, take help of your leads, take help of your managers to understand what tech stack is, what technology can do for you, what are its limitations. You need to embrace it. You should not be afraid of it, even if you don't have a technology background at all. I had kind of a mixed background, but it was like almost 10 to 15% technology in my 4 years of education. But at the same time, I was able to scale in the last 3 years to a very different, to a lot of tech stacks which we are using in Microsoft. Uh, then another tip is communicate clearly that your partner success is your success. And this is whether it's an external customer or external maker or internal maker or your end user. As a platform, your philosophy needs to be communicated to each of the stakeholders that their success is your success, and you should truly believe in that. Uh, I'll tell you a very small instance of it. Like there was a time in Microsoft. Again, I have heard this story second hand. So, but I'll give you an example that there were teams who were trying to build their own priority of things, and even though the team was very good, the team was doing the right thing, but the communication where like the team was like, we know what to do of the product, and we are what we are going to build what we want, versus uh, like of course the efficiency of the team went down because partners start believing in them, even they did a lot of good work, but because of that human connection a lot of things got failed there. And then because of a new lead, the messaging got changed for the whole team, and the team, every person in the team started saying that the our stakeholder success is our success. And just a little bit change in that culture actually transformed the whole platform team again. So this small thing matters a lot, that you need to believe in this and you need to communicate to everyone that your partner success is your success. And of course, last step, again on the communication, you are going to manage number of stakeholders. You will get you in a platform, you are going to get overwhelmed with the number of people you need to talk to. You need to you can say you need to give status updates to. You need to track. Uh, Believe me, what helps is over communicate everything. Tag people wherever you think, even if it's not necessary. Even on things that failed, just start like over communicate things, of course to an extent. Don't tag like your CEO just because something failed, but like over communicate things which you have been doing on a platform so that people are aware of what the limitations are and what the next plan is going to be. Platform actually serves to a lot more customers indirectly than what a consumer product, or maybe a product which has taken a dependency on platform. So your responsibility of over communication is very, very important. Saying that, I think that's it from my side. And thank you guys for being so patient throughout this. I hope that, okay, surprisingly, it got finished very soon, which I'm glad because we'll have time to take questions now. So yeah, that's it from my side.
Great. Thanks for sharing all those tips, Yogesh. Those were really, really helpful. At least I can say it from my end, because right now I think a lot of focus in the organization that I'm working on is building more platform related products. So yes, let's move on to the questions part. I think it's kind of diversified between the chat and the questions tab. So Yogesh, let me kind of translate the question to you, and maybe you can help answer those to the crowd. Right.
Sure.
So the first question was from Vivek Desai, happens to be the senior product manager at Paytm. I think it was from the very initial slides, as he asked, "Who is a maker?" Like a clear definition of the maker that you were mentioning in the first hand.
So makers are anyone who builds on top of a platform. So the reason I don't say developers is because a lot of modern tools which come, for example, something like Wix.com. It's not a tool for developers. It's a tool for, you can say, low code, no code developers. But we changed our you can say dictionary to upgrade the term developer to makers. The reason is developers has a stereotype, and that's where I again, in fact, I know that I've been getting this question: why are you using maker and why not developers? But
Okay.
maker seems to be more appropriate term for platform for people who build on platforms, because platform can mean a number of things.
Amazing. I think Siddharth almost answered that correctly, because I can see him answering the other PMs who might use your product to build more
So
products on top of it.
it's not just PMs. I would say it's
Almost. That
anyone who builds on top of it. Yeah.
amazing. So moving on to the next question, it was from Yogesh to Yogesh, and the question is: do you think there is an overlap between the duties of a UX designer and a product guy?
Um,
This
so
is actually one question which I always had in my mind as well, Yogesh, and your thoughts would really be very, very valuable because of you coming
right.
from a UX background and then handling products right now.
So yeah, let me put it this way. In fact, like, this is a very good question. Generally, whenever you are doing something, or let's say you are going after, like, developing something or going after a problem, you divide things into three things. Like, one is problem, proposal, and plan. And even like as an at least like what we do, how we define our responsibilities. Of course, the skill is different. UX skill is very different from a PM skill. And at the same time, we have defined gatekeepers. The PM is the gatekeeper of the problem, who also coordinates and manages the solution. But the gatekeeper of the proposal, especially for consumer products, is user experience or UX designers, because they are the one who is proposing. They can come up. They are better skilled into the exact job requirement, and they are the one who will come up with a lot more ideas. While PMs, although they'll contribute to the ideas and to the UX, but they are still going to be the gatekeeper of problem and the process. But at least internally in Microsoft, we keep the UX designer as gatekeepers of proposal. And
Okay.
implementation again comes to your engineers, where if engineers can come and say that even though you have a great proposal, this is something not we can do, then you of course negotiate. But again, the final call will always let engineer take, because he needs to be very confident in building it scalable, in building it in a more resilient and scalable manner. Even if he is able to, let's say, build a proposal, but there's a lot of security vulnerabilities or privacy flaws in it, we should not go ahead with that approach. So that's where we have defined the gatekeepers across different process.
Amazing. So, since Yogesh, since this will be an additional question from my end, but
Yeah.
since you were a part of the design team in Flipkart, Common Floor, and the early stage, I mean, not very early stage startups, but consider this question for a product manager who's going to join a super early stage or probably a Series A funded startup. Now, do you see that? Do you see UX designing as to be one of the primary skills for this product manager? Because the startup might just choose between a UX designer. I mean, because of shortage of funds, because of overhead costs, they might go for a product manager and not a UX designer individually. So, do you see this as a primary skill in the future, or probably even now?
So there's a difference between, so when we talk about UX design skill, it actually means a lot number of things. What I think a product person should always know is the design process, and like few things about design, like typography, like few basic principles around design. It's not a mandatory that you need to know everything about UX design. The reason is, like, for example, visual design. It needs a lot of investment. It needs a lot of time investment, skill development, and let the specialist take care of that. At the same time, a PM has a responsibility to understand the basic constructs of it, and have the and understand the you can say the design process of part of it, because he's the one. So startups can survive. That now depends on the industry you are and sector you are in, and the competition you have. You can probably survive without a PM for some time, and you can probably survive without a UX for some time. The more you scale, you will probably need both and both. But depending on what position you are in today and what sector you are in, for like what industry and competition you are in. For example, if you want to go ahead and go and uh, go into competition directly with Cred, you cannot afford not having a UX designer. But
Absolutely
that's
fair.
the bar industry has set. But if you go into, you can say, legacy CRM products, maybe for first 6 months, for a year, you can do without a UX guy. So it depends a lot on the context as well.
Sounds good. Okay, so I think the last question from Yogesh in the chat section would be, do you also test the product yourself? To what extent?
Yeah, of course we do.
That's
Yeah,
kind of
and to what
a
extent?
prerequisite.
So, right. So, what we focus on is generally. So, I personally do a general sanity test, and by sanity test is like instead of just playing it around with, I try to use it in a scenario which I would like to build as a platform. Even as a product, like when I was working as UX designer, I was trying to use it in more real life scenarios. But at the same time, you cannot go ahead with your testing process. You cannot live without your testing process. Uh, we certainly PMs cannot go ahead and do the extensive testing which your QA can bring in, or even your testing or vendors who can bring that kind of expertise.
That's great. Okay. Uh, Great. So moving to the next set of questions, which are in the questions tab. The first one is posted by Nilesh. He wants to understand the, I think, in-depth definition of test for resiliency, which
So
was mentioned in one of your slides.
So I'll at least so resiliency means a lot, many things, but I'll talk about like how I perceive it, or how at least how we use it today. So right now I'm working on a mobile platform, and so number one, like whenever you are building something, you need to cover up all your bases in terms of errors. That there can be number of things which can happen, which can go wrong with the product, and how do you gracefully handle your these errors, and in what all scenarios will your things break? That's one part of it. The second part, which is what is the customer environment or what is the environment in which customer operates in. So for example, if you are using a mobile app, you have a flaky connection. You have a connection which is less than 100 kbps. You have a connection which is greater than 2 mbps. Uh, you can uh, you can have people like 10,000 or 100,000 people calling the same API at the same simultaneously. So of course, like we have divided this resiliency framework into multiple parts. Uh, of course, 10,000, 100,000 also comes into scale, but at the same time, we know that things are going to break. The whole point is when things break, what do you do about it? And that's where the resiliency kick in.
Okay. Uh, Makes sense. Moving on to the next question, which is from Prabhakaran. Now, this is a fairly good question, at least from my opinion, because we have seen a lot of customers coming back to you in a fiery way if you don't kind of, if you kind of go ahead and say no to their request. So his question is exactly the same. How you, uh, since you mentioned about not custom developing for one customer, what if you are in an early stage and want to keep your customer happy? And so how
Right.
do you manage in such situations? I think this
So
does not only apply to early stages, but yeah, to a fairly larger scale as well. I mean, not Microsoft, but yeah, definitely to a larger scales. uh,
right, definitely. Like even we have made exceptions to this rule, but
yeah.
so I'll probably like answer both the question. Number one, for early
Sure.
stage, there is nothing called early stage platform. Believe me. Like I have seen examples of like I like in my network I talk to a lot of people. I have seen examples of Belong. I have seen examples of a lot of different startups who are actually catering to a market. And even though like they want to build a platform, and it's a good business strategy that even if you want to build a platform, don't build a platform. First, have a good customer for your scenario. And that's the reason you will always need to custom develop for a customer in early stages. There's nothing called early stage platform. You will like I know that even for people who have built a lot of good B2B products, even Zoho, which is even a Freshdesk, which is a very great like CRM tools or you can say platform as a service tool, all of them started with keeping two or three big customers in like customizing their product for two or three big customers. That's how you start. That's how you get the business in. Once you have a good inflow of business in, that's when you move into the platform stage of things. You don't move into platform stage of things until unless you have good chunk of customers. And when you move into platform stage of things, that's where you say that now it's not time to actually go ahead and doing any custom development for any particular customer. But if you look at the growth of a startup, you of course need to custom develop for your customers.
Right. So, Yogesh, again, I'm adding on to this question because the thought came in my mind. Do you kind of suggest as a say a product senior product person in an organization, do you would you suggest having two different teams, wherein one team definitely looks out on the R&D part of product development, bringing on new features, tackling what competitors won't be able to build, and then the other team kind of taking on these queries and keep building so that their customers are happy as well. How difficult is it, and I mean, why and why not? Is
Right. So so there's something called Kano model. Please do Google search about it.
Yeah,
So,
right.
yeah, right. So Kano model says that there's something called basic expectations,
Okay.
and then there's something called user delight. Uh, when if as a company in market, as a company who is operating in an industry or a market, uh, eventually all your things are going to very today the things which are seems to be a delight factor will become a basic expectation tomorrow.
Absolutely.
So even so, of course, the responsibility of bringing like more innovation, or you can say more X factor features, for the lack of better term, I really don't want to call that, but yeah, but I think there needs to be an active investment in there. At the same time, as you correctly said, having two teams may not be required because the same team can actually do the job of both. It depends on what particular capability you are looking at and what problem you are solving. I think that's where people miss the trick, is that people don't spend a lot of time in defining the problems, because the innovative solutions come from defining the problems right. And if your product team has a culture of defining the problem right, I think you won't have a problem of having two separate teams, because the team will understand whether they need to build a basic thing, or whether they need to do something disruptive to actually solve that problem.
Fair. Actually, sounds fair. So, great. So, moving to the next, I mean, I can see the last three questions, three, four. Actually, they've added a lot more. Vivek asks again that platform development outputs are normally APIs or pure backend features. As a PM, how do you do the UAT and the user testing?
Yeah. So like I don't like so very frankly, like I asked my engineering team to actually provide an app where I can test that API, not just an API, like not as an API interface, but more in terms of user scenario, because that's the core of my job. I'll always test it as a user scenario. So even in each stage, whether it's a dev test or UAT, or even pre-prod or prod, like my job is to always make sure that I'll test a customer scenario. I'll not test the technicalities of it. So at least this is how I try to scope my job or my role. And I like thankfully like we have a very solid engineering team who actually takes care of it quite well among themselves. So you just need to talk in terms of customer and they'll pick it up very well. Yeah.
Perfectly. Lucky you. Okay. So, moving on to the next question. Vivek, if you have any follow-up question on this, you can definitely post it. Gitesh asks, coming from a design background, how easy or difficult did you find communicating with the engineers at Microsoft?
So okay, so let me put it this way. Uh, People say that when you are a designer, you don't get along that much with engineers as much you get along with PMs. That's the general trend I have seen over. And but after becoming PM, I found that engineers are best friends. They need to be like you can go and talk about 100 different things, what you want to do, what you can do as a company and all. If your engineers are not able to back you, you really can't do anything about it. And a lot of it, so while even from a UX background, I think even my outlook was always that we know like we can bring in so much value just by design, that it actually creates a differentiation in the market, which is very true. And design has such a large potential to do that. In fact, a lot of companies are already doing it. uh, at the same time, the belief in the design need to come from engineers as well, and that's where I think I really help my team, both engineers and designers, to bring on the same page that why each of their job is important. And at least like even today, actively, if I get a chance, I try to do it. But just to answer like Gitesh's question, that did you find difficult to communicate with engineers? Of course, yes, but they are my best friends now.
Okay. Awesome. You kind of keep ordering pizzas for them. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I think the last set of questions. We have three now. So Tony asks, what are some of the best practices in your suggestions that'll make you better in creating a PRD? Interesting being, uh, yeah, where should we draw the line to stop going deep into the implementation details and leave it to the developers, especially in startups? Fair question
So
coming to
yeah,
someone who's coming from a design background.
right. So that's where I said like we actually dished. It's not in Teams, but in my previous team, we dished the whole specification and PRD process. As I told you, like we have gatekeeper, like we have three process: problem, proposal, and plan, and that's what our new document is. FYI, we have document which has three sections called problem, proposal, and plan. And problem has a bunch of questions. For example, uh, who are your key stakeholders? What exactly the problem is? What is your current experience? How are you going to improve that experience? What is your key KPI? So that's something which I take care of, And then the proposal comes from if it's mostly see the thing with platform is sometimes you need to go into like API level discussion or API level design and then sometimes you need to just have a user experience part of it. So where the user experience part of it, you will bring in designers and they'll create ideas for you and they'll say that okay, this is the proposal which we think is optimum to go ahead with. And when it comes to detailing in terms of API level details, I personally try to avoid that. The reason being, I am like in my personal philosophy, I am a gatekeeper of problem. Even though if someone asks me that, please can you help us into writing the details of this API, I will sit with them. I'll have time with them, but I'll make them the stakeholder or the gatekeeper because they have better knowledge than me. So in terms of drawing the line, I think it also depends on how much in depth can you go and do you want to go in terms of as a strategic decision because uh, to be very frank, if I start designing an API and versus an engineer or an architect who is 100 times better than me, I think that will not be fair to each other's job. So I definitely leverage people, but I also make sure that we have good responsible people who can actually make the right decision, who can stand by the right decisions uh, when tested.
Right. I think
Especially,
the answer and the question fairly kind of draws the gray area when you talk about PMs in early stage startups, as what are the exact roles and responsibilities. So yeah, that always prevails. Moving on to the next question is from Gotham. I think it's an addition to what Vivek asked early. It is in startup, mainly in the product industry, design requirement which has predefined deadlines and deliverables. How will you apply and manage the user testing part where you have less opportunities to validate your design with the end users? So I think a part of it was already answered by Yogesh in the previous question by Vivek, that he kind of does it by himself. He all is most of his uh, the major part of his job is to kind of be the user to test it out completely. But yeah,
oh,
Yogesh, if you want to take
oh,
this up.
oh, no. So in these case, actually, so if you mean user testing part, sorry, I did not mean user testing part. I just mean
So
sorry.
what essentially Gautam in a brief, what he's trying to ask is in a product industry where all the design requirements are predefined and you don't have much to say, how will you apply and manage the user testing part where you have less opportunities to
Oh yeah,
validate your design with the end users?
right. So especially in platform, in fact, a lot for consumer product. The truth is, as much as we want to talk about user testing, you don't have the opportunity to do it. And all the things are so fast paced that you'll not be able to do it. Let me put it this way. And for better
Right.
or for worse, it definitely bites you back. Um, like for example, even if things go well for first 2 months and people are happy using it, there are a bunch of things which like scenarios which evolve later. And second part will be like you have shipped it without testing it, people will not be happy using it. In both the cases, what I have found very useful is one is like consumer product. You have very like you can do A/B test. You have bunch of tools available now. Please go and read about this. And I think it's a culture. Even if you are a UX designer today, I think it's everyone's responsibility to set the right culture in your team of how to get things tested. You don't have 100% rollout in the first. Have 5%. Take feedback. Look at numbers. Take qualitative feedback as well. So consumer is like a lot more mature in those terms. For platform, it becomes a bit of challenge, and that's where I initially thought about having close early adopters. So in Power Apps, I literally used to talk to. So we have a program called MVP, Most Valued Professionals, who are basically kind of close group, like a relatively close group to Microsoft, who are also our customers or maybe makers who actually develop on the product. So we literally we actually like we have made friends with them. Like the only reason is because when we build something, we are now never not going to have tested when we roll it out. So we bring in those guys. We bring in for qualitative testing. We bring in for bring them in as early adopters. We give them separate builds for them to test it out and play it and build something on top of it. So I think the key is even if you're not able to validate it later, don't let it go till that stage. Have even let's say you have one single customer who is working with your startup, go and talk to the people, bring them in, give them a separate build because those are customers. Take them feedback very early, even if it's in development. It's okay. You don't have to do user testing on scripts, even if it's in development. But 2 weeks or 3 weeks before it goes out, at least get it tested so that you have red flags already known. Apart from like you roll it out and then roll it back, that's not a good precedence to set.
That
Hopefully,
kind of yep. That kind of solves the question's crux. Moving on to the last question, Yogesh, before we head out. This is again from Nilesh. How do you manage platform perfection and go to market? It is always a wormhole to go for perfection and not worry about go to market date.
oh, and there's nothing called platform perfection. There's always trade-offs. Believe me, there's always trade-offs. If I start building something perfect, it's going to take so many time. It's going to take so much time that I can literally just calling on native camera, like on mobile, I can literally take a month to develop it versus 2 days. So of course, that's where I think PMs also come in because you need to clearly define what scenarios do you want to get fulfilled. Plus, again, specifically for platform, a responsibility for PMs is to make sure that whatever you design or whatever is going out today is scalable to other scenarios. Even if it's not scalable to other scenarios, for example, your API contracts or your JS SDKs have the provision to scale. Like that much you need to have, like you should be able to talk to your developers and negotiate on it. That I don't need all capabilities now, but it should not be that your capabilities are, yeah, my future capabilities get blocked off today's design. So that is something which I learned over time that track these things as well. Track your scalability and extensibility.
Fair point. Great. I think we are done with the questions part as well, Yogesh. Thanks a ton for coming up on a Wednesday evening at 9. Kind of late. I understand that, but yeah, thanks a lot for this insightful session. I personally have a lot of takeaways. I'm sure the crowd has too. Right. For the crowd, thank you, folks. Thanks for joining. One request: while send out a feedback form because this is very important for unconventional geeks to grow further. This was the first event in the series, and your feedback will help us grow in the right direction. So I'll send out the feedback form. The ones who fill it will get the slides from Yogesh. So yes, I think another question there. Thanks a lot. Okay, yeah, perfect. Thank you, guys. Ending the session. If you want to reach out to Yogesh, he is available on LinkedIn and Twitter under the same name, Yogesh Gupta. And all your queries would be answered there. You can connect with him, learn, and yeah, keep learning.
Thank you, Utkarsh, for giving me an opportunity, and thank you to the Unconventional Geeks team, like Siddharth as well, for giving this platform. It was really.
Is Siddharth here? I don't know if Siddharth is here. Okay.
Right. And
yes,
thank
he
you
is.
to the audience. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Siddharth sits out in Singapore right now, so yeah, I guess it's kind of late for him to sleep.
Yeah,
that's fine, man. No worries.
Perfect. So
Cool.
anyone who wants to wait in the social lounge, I'll be there for a while. Let's jam up, talk if there's something to talk about products, growth, or anything else. And thank you for joining. I'll send the feedback form right away. Thanks, Yogesh. Thanks,
Thank you.
Siddharth.
Thanks, guys. Thank you all.